You are now listening to the Bradcast. Wherever you are right now, I hope this gives you space to breathe and to reflect. Hello, and welcome to the Bradcast. I am so excited that we are finally sitting in our brand new chairs in our set. And with me today, I have the wonderful Emma Monks. Welcome to you, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
Amazing. Emma, you are a wife. You are a children's pastor. You are a child of God, most importantly. And you are also pregnant.
I am, exactly.
So congratulations for that. And when we were talking about having the Bradcast, having come on the Bradcast to begin with, the image of you being almost a midwife for this podcast came to mind. So I want to thank you for that and helping us kind of deliver this first episode and bringing it to life. So that's a real kind of, I'm very grateful for that, to you for that as well. So my first and most important question for you is, you're carrying life right now. And so what have you learned in the past, however many months, most importantly?
Whilst being pregnant?
Oh,
good question. I really have been challenged in deep ways. I think most people that go through pregnancy go through a bit of a tough spell at the beginning, and you kind of get the excitement of, oh my goodness, like the Lord's blessed us with new life. God has blessed us with a gift of life. And then suddenly everything seems to go downhill physically, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel awful. And I think people sometimes, when things are going really well, forget about God, because they're like, oh my gosh, like things are going so well and I'm just on a roll. I'm doing things in my own strength, and people can forget about God. Whereas other people, they can find it really hard to relate to God when things aren't going well. And I think I've realised that that's more maybe my tendency, that that's the kind of boat I fall in. And so I kind of felt like in the tough times, I was like, God, where are you? Like, I'm praying, I'm reading my Bible, I'm serving you, I'm trying my hardest, but yeah, I'm not getting better, and like things aren't changing. And it was in that time where I just felt just a sense of hopelessness. Like, well, what's the point? What's the point in praying? Like, God, what's the point in even believing that you're there when you're not doing anything to change the situation? And I feel like through that time, through like persevering, I was really challenged personally and in who I am and my character, and actually still being a godly person and still relying on God to help me display the fruits of the Spirit, to be kind, to be gentle, even when I'm not feeling good. But I think the thing that I've learned through it is that God's still there even when things aren't going well. God's still there even when you're feeling absolutely rubbish. Like God is still there. And I think the kind of phrase that has kept coming to me is hold on to hope, and hold on to the hope that even when things aren't going right now, or things aren't feeling good now, we do have a hope in Jesus. And like even though we're not necessarily experiencing joy and freedom, and you know, we're going to experience suffering, but even through the suffering, as a Christian, the difference is we have hope, and we have hope that actually one day that will be wiped away, and we have hope and faith that Jesus is still who he says he is, and he's still good, he's still God, he's still in control. And so I think that's probably been one of the main lessons I've learned so far in the challenges of pregnancy, but there's also been lots of joys as well.
It's such like this identity kind of struggle you're talking about a little bit, is that God has blessed you with life, but your identity in Christ is being challenged through these highs and through these lows as well. So I think that, I mean, you'll see it throughout the Bible. When we get onto sort of women of the Bible as well, is that even like through pregnancy, you are going through emotional and physical kind of hardship that you almost want God to kind of pick you up and just hold you, you know, throughout all of it. But allowing you to go through these highs and these massive highs and massive lows can be quite an identity kind of struggle. You know, I think about me supporting my football team, right? Is that through the lows I go, I'm thinking about switching teams here, you know? But then through the highs you go, yeah. I'm like, they're amazing. We've got the best players. We've got this. And what's so funny is that I always refer back to, there's a moment in the Bible where Jesus gives a hard teaching and some of the disciples start to walk away. And he turns to Peter and he says, are you not going to follow them? And Peter goes, well, where else am I supposed to go?
Yeah, so
you have the words for eternal life. Where else am I supposed to go, Lord? And I feel like that sometimes in those lows is you go, well, where else am I supposed to go?
Yeah, so good.
And that can sometimes be like where God works the most in those parts. For you and your story and your upbringing, was there much Jesus in your house when you were growing up?
No, not at all, really. So grew up in a non-Christian household, didn't go to church, didn't have any people of faith in my family, or I'd say if people had faith, it was very private. I didn't even know they had faith. But yeah, I think, would you like me to explain
Please.
What happened?
Please.
What's gone on? Why are you here now? So yeah, I love looking back as well, because I see how, even though I didn't find faith until I was 22, I actually see how like God's been putting people in my life and putting situations in my life, and I call them touch points, basically. Like, he's been touching my life in different ways throughout my whole life, but then in the moment you have no idea, kind of thing. And there are a few like key touch points which I look back on and go, oh my goodness, God was so trying to get through to me. And that wasn't the moment that I turned to him, that wasn't the moment that I believed in him, but actually, like, he's always been pursuing me, he's always been chasing after me. And I love that song, The Goodness of God, and it says like, your goodness is running after, it keeps running after me. And I do look back and I think, oh my goodness, like God really was chasing me, which is just, you feel like you're being courted almost. It like the Bible describes Jesus as a bridegroom, like trying to pursue his wife, and it did feel like, oh my goodness, God is doing that. I'll maybe say like two key moments in that journey. One was when I was probably about 17, in secondary school. I was studying philosophy and ethics, and some of the big questions are, does God exist? Who is God? And you look through loads of philosophical arguments for and against. I could argue every philosophical view, but I didn't actually know the answer. And I think ultimately everybody is searching for truth. And that's what the kind of question I got to was, okay, well, I know all these opinions, I know all these theories, but what's actually true? And actually, you know, theoretically, I can argue for and against, but what do I believe and what's actually right? Because obviously people have been asking these questions for thousands of years. Is there a God? And I'd never experienced God, but I thought, well, there must be something in it for it still to be going on and for people to still be thinking about this. And I remember I chatted to my teacher, who I knew used to be a vicar. So I thought, well, you obviously believe that God is real. And I was like, can you just tell me what you think? And he was like, oh, and he didn't tell me what he thought, because I think they're basically not allowed to. So I went home that day really frustrated, and I was like, I'm just so fed up of not knowing the answer. Like, I just want a simple answer, like, who is God? If God is real, why is he here? What does this mean for me? Because like I just wanted a straight answer, not an airy fairy answer. And I've lived in the same house growing up from when I was like 5 to 25, and this had never happened before. But that day when I got home from school and I was sat at my desk and I couldn't do my work because I was just thinking about like, gosh, this is so frustrating. I just want to know an answer about if God is real. And then I had a knock at the door, and this lady who I'd never seen before, never saw her again, basically just handed me this leaflet and then kind of went off. And this leaflet was like, who is God? Why did he come? What does this mean for you?
Wow.
And I literally looked around the room as if I was being watched, because I felt like I was on Big Brother and people, or like the Truman Show, and people were trying to like trick me. And I remember just being like, I felt so I felt so like seen. And I felt like, oh my goodness, maybe God's been listening to me. Maybe this is like a miraculous sign. And I can't explain why, but I just like burst into tears because I just felt so overcome. And I think the tears for me was something which I wasn't really a big crier growing up. It wasn't something that I cried a lot, but a sign of God kind of moving in me throughout my journey was I was just kind of overcome by emotion.
Tell me about it.
And I just couldn't explain it. And I was like, this is so weird. And I just had no explanation. I couldn't even describe how I was feeling, had no words to articulate it. But I remember just thinking, gosh, that's so weird. But then I had no way to articulate it, no one to really speak to about it, no one that I knew who had faith. So I just kind of put it down to a weird coincidence and left it to the side. Then fast forward a few years, I went to drama school, and I was 20 when I went to drama school, so that was 3 years later. And during Freshers Week, the local pastor was fantastic at doing student outreach, and he just happened to like knock on my window, literally in the house that I was living in. And he was just going around knocking on doors and being like, hey, we're doing like a student event out front, come and get a free barbecue. And we're like, fantastic, free food, let's go. So I ended up getting really plugged in with this church community, and like a bunch of us who had never been to church before, all like fresh in drama school, wanting to make friends. We were all just like, oh, why don't we just go to church? They're doing free pizza, and why not? We're students, it's free food.
That's the way to get them in.
That is literally the way to get anyone to church. It's free food, especially for students. So there was like about 12 of us that weren't Christian that were like, church? Should we go to church this week? Yeah, let's go. Yeah. And we started going, and like every now and then I'd have these like emotional encounters where I just feel so emotional, and I'd start crying, and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. Like my new friends are going to think I'm like, something's wrong with me. Yeah. And the church people are going to think, oh, we've got her, kind of thing. And I'm like, no, I just don't know why I'm crying, but this is really weird.
Was there a certain point you were crying? Was it in worship, or was it through what someone was saying?
I think multiple times it was different things. So sometimes it would be like someone would say, can I pray for you? And as they were praying for me, I would just weep. Or sometimes it would just be looking around in worship and seeing everybody worshiping and being just so moved, I'd just start crying. Or other times it might be something someone said, maybe in a sermon, I'd be like, oh wow, that's really kind of moved me. But I just always brushed it off.
Was that out of fear, would you say, or was that out of just an unknown, you weren't too sure what to do with that?
I think it's pride. I think it's pride, because ultimately it's admitting that you were wrong your whole life, and it's ultimately admitting that you're not enough by yourself, which is really hard. And the world tells you like to be successful, to be strong, to be powerful. And drama school is all about like making yourself known and profiling yourself. And so being weak isn't very appealing.
Yeah. It's a bit of a contrast, that.
Oh, it's such a contrast.
Because drama school's like, we're not only gonna try and kind of find ourselves, but we're also gonna play roles of other people. You know, it's almost like you're putting on a different person every time. But then in the kind of adverse side of that, you've gone inside. You've gone like the other way. Instead of going exterior to try and put on something else, you've gone, well, what is going on in here? I don't quite understand. I'm crying. All these emotions are pouring out of me, and I don't understand. And was this like a turning point? Do you feel like God was really just turning the cogs in this area?
I think he was definitely stirring me. But I think because of my pride, and because ultimately I didn't want to surrender to God, and I didn't want to have to change my life. You know, I was living a life which was very worldly. I was, going out drinking. I had different boyfriends, and actually the idea of having to surrender to God meant changing my lifestyle. And I think I wasn't ready for that. So I ended up getting into a non-Christian relationship, and my boyfriend at the time said, "You're going to church?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you believe in God?" And I was like, "No, not really. I just kind of go now. That's just what I've fallen into." And he was like, well, why are you going to church if you don't believe in God? And I was like, it's a very good point. And then I just stopped going to church. Because then I was like, so that was my end of my first year of uni. And I was like, yeah, I guess I don't believe it. Like, why am I just going along for the sake of it? And so I ended up stopped going to church for the whole of my second year of university. And I actually had a really tough year that year, just in kind of lots of different ways. It just felt like quite a dark year. And then when it came to my third year of university, I'd ended up splitting up with this boyfriend. And I just kind of had a bit of a reflection time. And I was like, do you know what? Like, I've lived the uni life. I've done everything that everybody says you need to do before the end of uni, and to kind of like let your hair down kind of thing. I've done everything the world tells us we need to do to make the most out of uni. And it doesn't fulfill. Like, there's something that's not fulfilling. And I remember my first year of university, we went to the local cathedral and the preacher spoke about, you know, we all have this gap in our hearts, and no matter what we try and fill it with, it always feels like it's not enough. There always feels like the next thing needs to happen. It always feels like the grass is greener somewhere else. And he was just saying, like, it's because the only thing that can fill that hole is God. And I remember him saying that and thinking, wow, that's really profound, but it didn't stick with me. But then when I fast forwarding a couple of years into my third year, I kind of was reflecting. I was like, it makes sense. I don't feel fulfilled by all these things, which should be really fun and should be really fulfilling. And I also don't feel that good about myself, because I just didn't feel that good about myself. And I was like, I actually feel like I want to be a better version of myself. And then I just thought, do you know what? I did feel like I was being that when I was going to church, and I did feel like that was helping me just to become a better person. And then so it wasn't until kind of after Christmas in my third year of university that I plucked up the courage to go back, because I was also really scared about going back, because I'd basically just ghosted the vicar for a year and a bit. And he'd text me like being like, hey Emma, like, how are you? Because like in my first year of uni, we used to go to his house for lunch. We used to go to all the events. And then it got to a point where I basically just walked in the complete opposite direction and was like, no, I want to go my own way. I want to do my own thing. And I completely shut the door to church and to the vicar. And then it just felt like such a, I felt so much guilt at first, thinking, and I think that guilt is not from God, but guilt was probably the enemy trying to stop me from going back. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot catch eyes with the vicar. I just cannot look at him. Like, I'm going to go back to church, but he's the last person I want to see, because I just feel so bad that I haven't replied to him for like over a year. And I remember like sheepishly going in and just feeling a bit nervous. And then lo and behold, as soon as the doors open, who stood there? The vicar. and I remember thinking, my heart just sank, and I was like, oh my goodness.
It's like seeing an ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, it's like seeing an ex. And I was actually like, oh no, there's no way I can escape this. And I'll never forget his reaction, because it just reminds me of what Jesus would do. He just looked at me, and my heart went thud to the floor. But his face lit up. And he was just like, Emma, it is so good to see you. And he was so genuinely happy. And in my head, I thought, oh my gosh, he's probably going to judge me. He's going to be thinking like, oh, wow, you haven't replied to any of my messages. But like in that moment, there was absolutely no resentment, no judgment. It was just complete joy that I'd come back. And it reminds me of the prodigal son when, you know, the son walks away, he does his own thing. And he comes back sheepishly going, I will just grovel at my father's feet to ask him to come back. And the father sees him and literally like lifts up his tunic and runs to him with such joy and embraces him, throws a celebration. And that is, I didn't even know that story at the time, but that is how I felt in that moment. And then it was actually during that service that I had my first encounter with God, where I'd say that I realized God was real. So I think it was during the worship, and I just felt like after that, I just felt so much more relaxed. It was like my guards went down, and I was like, wait a second, this is a safe space. This is a safe space where I'm loved. And I just kind of was soaking it all in during the worship. And I think just kind of said in my heart, like, thank you. thank you. This is amazing. And then in that moment, it literally just felt like a barrier between heaven and earth just broke. And for the first time, I was just flooded with God's love in a way which was, it was so clear. It wasn't confusing. And I just felt like God said to me, I know you, I love you, and I want a relationship with you.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, he's real. He's real. It was just like absolute, my eyes were just opened. And I was like, God's, and that question which I'd asked for years and years and years, is God real? What's the answer? And I realized that actually I had to have my own experience with God. Like nobody else could tell me God was real, no matter how convincing they were. And it was in that moment I was like, I actually cannot deny this anymore. Like he's real and he loves me and he knows me and he wants a relationship with me. And so that was the start of my journey 8 years ago.
So you approached that church with that kind of worldly mindset of almost like an eye for an eye. It's like, I've kind of betrayed you by going off and doing my own thing. He must hate me, but he greeted you with that love that can only be shown by like Christ. And that's why he went, oh my goodness, Emma, you're back. You know, thank God, praise God.
Yeah.
You know, that's a different, I think that's probably what would have initially just taken your guard down, because that's not the way the world would have greeted you in that situation. But also what you said is that it's a matter of the heart more than it is a matter of just theoretically thinking something. I experienced the same thing in the sense of theoretically I was sure, well, there must be something. Because I'd experienced too much in my own life to ignore the fact that there was something else going on. But it was only that moment where my heart was inclined and I went, you know what? I'm fed up of asking the questions now. Are you real? If you are, I invite you into my life. And same as you, it's that barrier broke in that same moment, and you feel God's tangible love at that point. So I don't know if it's similar with you, but at that point when I realized God was real and I had that encounter, my initial reaction was not like, oh yeah, it was, oh no. Right? And I don't know if that was the same for you, because that was what I felt. I remember being on my floor and being like, oh no. I was like, what am I supposed to do now? You know, did you have that moment? And like, what happened after that?
I definitely had the, what do I do now? I was like, what happens? Like, what is this? It felt like I had just gone into like another realm, and I was like, what is this crazy world? Like, what do I do here? How does this work? I felt like a child.
Yeah, exactly.
Being I have no idea. Like, what is prayer? Like, what is the Bible? I have no idea. And God was just really kind and gracious with me. I think it's hard because, gosh, I've been through, I mean, we're always being refined. We're always learning more about God. We're always growing in love for him and depth. But I definitely had so much challenge in those first few months of being like, okay, well, I now know that God is real. I now want a relationship with him. Like, it's not even, it's a choice, but also like it's a desire.
Yeah.
And it was so exciting. But then I was bound by all these old habits. I was bound by all these old ways of life, which were just normal. And those things are really hard just to shift overnight.
Yeah.
And I think one of the hardest things I felt was shifting people's perspectives who knew me.
Yeah.
Like, all my friends knew me as like crazy uni Emma. And then suddenly I'm saying, I don't actually want to go out and get really drunk and do those things we used to do.
Yeah.
And for them, they still wanted to do those things. And so I actually feel like it was really hard with my friendships, because I love my friends and I'm not judging my friends. But for me, I suddenly had this like new desires. My desire wasn't to go and do those things anymore. And I it's almost like I became sensitive in a new way to things that I was never sensitive to before.
It says in the Bible that I always think of a slave to sin and a slave to righteousness, is that you're a slave to something. Paul says You're either a slave to sin or you're a slave to righteousness. And I think the hardest thing for me was going back into the world to see family, to see friends, and for them to see me and not see anything different on the outside, but inside, it's like I just had an organ transplant. And I was in that process of healing and trying to understand what it is that is going on now. What is this new identity? You know, how am I supposed to grow in this? Because like you said, you become more sensitive. It's like when you've got a bad headache and the light is a little bit more sensitive as you'll go and you'll be in an environment where people are drinking. For me, and I would be like, well, I don't really want to drink. Or I'd go and see my friends who would be smoking and taking all sorts of drugs. And I'd be like, well, I don't want to do that anymore. And it was weird for them, but it was also weird for me because I was confused by this new desire. There's a pastor that I actually it really helped me at the time when I was battling between, and you wrestle for a while. And he said that when you accept Christ and you have that new desire, it's almost like getting a liver transplant. And he said, you're going to go into that surgery feeling much better than you're going to come out. And you're going to come out, not only is this new liver inside of you and it's going to heal you, it's better for you, you know that it's good, but you're going to be in pain for weeks, for months, healing. And that's what it feels like, that's like an organ transplant. Although what you have inside of you is better, it says in Hebrews 13 times that Jesus is better. And you have to trust that although you've got these desires to go back to that old way of doing things, is you have to remind yourself in that, it's quite critical, that point, is you remind yourself Jesus is better.
Yeah.
And you trust in that. And he is faithful to that. And he has been for me, and I'm sure he definitely has been for you. Because you'd come out of relationships with men and guys at that time as well, even that one who questioned your faith, which I think is quite funny at that point, is that you just went, oh yeah, why am I going to church? Did your view of men just completely change as well?
I think that one, I think my view on relationships changed very quickly. I think yes. However, like God's took me on such a journey with fully surrendering to him with relationships, and you know, there were definitely times where I fell back thinking, oh, you know, this person's really open to faith, this person, you know, they could become a Christian, and then realize actually that's just not God's best for me, basically, because they weren't believers. And I remember really wrestling with that. And I do remember this was a really funny time when I was really seeking a Christian relationship. I thought, do you know what? I just want to be with someone who's actually a Christian. And in my own strength, I just went, right, I'm going to download a Christian dating app and I'm going to message loads of people. I'm going to arrange loads of dates for this weekend, basically. I'm just going to go out on the hunt and make it work. Because in my head, I thought, right, okay, well, I want a Christian relationship now. But at that time, I didn't realize that I was actually not finding my fulfillment in God. I was still trying to find my fulfillment in seeking fullness in a relationship, which actually will never fulfill me. And so I kind of went out on this mission, lined up a couple of dates for that weekend. And then I felt gently convicted by the Spirit. And I remember being like, oh, I haven't prayed about this. Like, I haven't asked God about this. I've just gone ahead and done it. And I was like, I should probably check in with God and just see what he thinks. Because at this time I was like, oh, I know when I don't do things God's way, things don't go well. And I was selfishly just trying to protect myself. Like, I don't really want to get myself into a sticky situation. So I remember just kind of sheepishly sat on my bed by myself going, okay, God, if you don't want me to do this, or if this was wrong of me to do this, please just let me know. And I remember God just being like, yeah, I didn't ask you to get my dating apps. And I was like, no. And I remember just being like, I felt like a teenager with like a parent, and I was just like, I felt like the stroppy teenager, and I was like, oh, for goodness sake, God, but I just want to make something happen, and that's why I've done this. And then I remember being like, oh God, I've just arranged all these dates this weekend, and they seem really nice. Like, surely you wouldn't ask me to cancel them. Like, I'll just go on the dates and then I just won't follow through with it afterwards. And then God was like, no, you need to cancel the dates. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so awkward because like now I'm going to have to message them. I was like, I'm going to have to message. I literally pursued them. I set up the day. I was like, when are you free? I was so proactive. And then now I'm going to have to message them a couple of hours later to be like, sorry, by the way,
God says no.
God says no. And so I was like, what am I meant to say to them, God? I'm going to look absolutely crazy. And God was like, just tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. And so I was like, oh, this is awful. And this is so humiliating. But I got my app out. Oh, okay, God. I messaged them, been like, I'm really sorry. I've just prayed about this. And I really feel like God's telling me I need to actually get off dating apps and just spend time. And God was like, you need to get off these dating apps and actually just spend time with me and like build your relationship with me. And so I told them that, and they were so respectful, and they were like, wow, I'm so glad you listened to God. Thank you so much for being so honest and letting me know. And it was so much easier. And they were so, just so supportive of me doing that. I remember thinking, oh gosh, actually doing things God's way isn't always as hard as you think. And then I had the most amazing couple of years with God, basically, where I stayed deliberately single and just had such intentional time. I called it my like father-daughter time with God. And because I'd never really had that space before, just to focus on mine and God's relationship without thinking also about wanting a romantic relationship. And then just having that kind of few years with me and God, I was so fulfilled. Like genuinely, at that point I was the most fulfilled I'd ever been, because I was like, I actually could not have a relationship. I could never get married and I'd still be so fulfilled. And I think I just found true joy and fulfillment in the Lord at that time. So that was a real kind of journey of surrender for me as well in my faith.
It's interesting, you know, the part that really started to turn the cogs for me was around relationships, because I remember being in Dubai with my roommate and saying to him, well, you know, there's this girl and I just can't stop thinking about her and it's on my mind. And he said something so profound to me that changed my understanding of what was actually going on. Is he basically said that in your life, you're going to have a certain set of loves. And he said, if you're going to place this girl or this thing at the top, where are you putting God? And he said, you really think that's going to fulfill you? And I went, no. No, you're right. You're right. And I remember the moment where it switched. It was just, the thing is firstly, I felt like I had to be proactive with taking that thing down. Is God's not just going to move himself up, because you have to actually take that thing down. And I think that was the most difficult part, is because without actually having encountered God to begin with, I had to make that step, because he's already waiting there. So I had to move. And it's once I started to clear that path away, as I started to see him more clearly. And I think now, like you said, those kind of years where you're just spending time with him. And for me, it was about a year. And I was still in that thought process of, I'm going to stay away from women. I don't want to be anywhere near there. I was like, that's not a place I want to go back into, because I know that my way of thinking is not going to be appropriate in that setting. And it was until God did that work, and he's faithful to that, and he starts doing that work. And when your heart is then in the right place, where you can go, now my loves are ordered correctly. God is number one, and anyone who comes into my life will be able to, you know, help me internally and externally, but will not become an idol in my life. It was the best piece of advice I ever got, is find someone that will help you internally and externally. So can they speak into your life? Can they help you when you're feeling down? Have they got the words? Are they faithful to God? Are they able to help you in your spiritual struggles? And it was a whole new way of seeing things, you know, looking past people's eyes. Because beforehand in the world, I was very exterior focused, you know, but look past someone's eyes, look into their soul. What's their soul saying? Totally different way of dating. And it was really, really good advice that I actually want to pass on to the audience. Was brilliant advice that I had received. And it rewired my way of, number one, viewing women, but number two is viewing what a relationship actually is. You know, because in the world, a relationship is very externally focused. You know, are they actually helping you inside? What's happening inside? because that's going to wear off. It's like what's actually happening like inside, and that's where God has really changed my heart on that. So for you, and after all of these dating app experiences, you didn't go back to dating apps, I can imagine. No, I didn't think you would. But when did your relationship now kind of come on the scene? Was that a in-person church?
It was it was in person. So well, it's actually Andy, my now husband. He kind of found he kind of knew of me because he'd applied for a job at the church in the kids and youth department, and I was working in the kids and youth department. So he'd seen me on the church website kind of thing, and then he ended up getting a job just down the road in a different church, but doing kids and youth, but I think he had in his heart like, oh, it'd be interesting like to meet Emma, see whether we get on kind of thing, but didn't want to kind of force it. So he just he actually prayed and said, okay, God, if I'm meant to meet this Emma person, please can it come from you? I don't want it to come from me. I don't want it to be forced. And then literally the next day, 2 of our members of staff visited their church, which is really rare. Yeah. And we're like, oh, like you should meet up with some of our kids and youth people. And Andy's like, oh yeah, isn't there someone called Emma there? And then they're like, yeah, there is. She'd love to meet up with you. You should message her. So then he ended up messaging me. And then the rest is history. Got married a year later. Oh my
goodness. It's so wonderful, and like obviously I've met Andy a lot, and he's wonderful. And I think I remember you saying to me before that like Andy really pursued you in such like a holy way almost. And I think that on another time we'll get you both on to talk more into that relationship period then. But I think through these experiences, not just with relationship but the work God's done in you, has your mind or your kind of character changed with this kind of biblical womanhood idea that God has painted out? Is that what sort of parts of you have changed that you were once holding on to, thinking that was so concrete as a woman, but now God's gone, well, this is different to the role that I want you to have, or to the character that I want you to have?
I think you're so right about how the world is quite exterior, and it's all about how you present yourself, how you look, how you come across. Whereas like God looks into the heart, and he sees beyond the outside appearance. And so I think God has just changed my priorities. Like I really want God to work on my character. And I think in doing that, you feel a lot more confident. Like the world tells you, if you, post on Instagram and you look really successful and you've got loads of followers, or you've got loads of money, or you've got loads of influence, or you're in the right room, the right people, then that's what success looks like. And that's how you can feel confident. Whereas I feel actually for me, it's like knowing my identity, knowing my identity in Jesus is ultimately the thing that gives me security, that gives me confidence. And it just allows me to stand firm, I think. Whereas before, I'd always feel like, you have to try and impress people with things you've done or things you say. Now I'm not thinking about trying to impress people in that way. I'm just like, I'm just going to be who God's made me to be. And that's enough. So I feel a lot more confident just resting in that.
I think a lot of people now do have that tendency to compare with each other. As you were speaking, I was thinking of Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah and Jacob. And I think the story goes that Jacob goes in to her father and says, well, I want to marry Rachel. And he says, well, come and work for me for 7 years and then I will give her hand in marriage to you. But he kind of dupes him, and then he ends up marrying Leah, and Rachel ends up being in this sort of comparison, jealousy, kind of envy. And I was saying that there is an importance of being desired, I think, and as the world, you want to be desired not only by a partner but also by other people, is that you want to be wanted by others. And I think that's where you're like, the social media definitely has not helped that, in the sense that you're always wanting to feel wanted by other people. But has your identity in Christ taken away that want or that desire for other people to kind of want you or like you, or do elements of that still linger for you as well?
I definitely think for me personally, like I am a natural people pleaser. I love people, but I have a real I guess it's a stronghold, to be fair, in my life. Like it's something that I'm constantly trying to have to be aware of and asking God, am I doing this? Am I really doing this for you? Or am I doing this so that people perceive me in a certain way? Yeah. And I think different people have different struggles, but I think that's something that I do have to be deliberate about, because I when I used to act, basically, it's all about you. It's all about, okay, I've got to look better on stage. I've got to stand out more than everybody else here. Yeah. I've got to make myself memorable. It's all about you, really, especially at drama school when you're trying to get agents and things. And then I remember coming to church and doing my kind of first performances as the kids pastor, and I was acting. I wrote scripts, did different characters, and I remember like just having to pray before I went on stage at church, just being like, there's an audience of one. There's an audience of one. Like, it's only about you, Jesus. It only matters what you think. Like, if you're pleased by this performance, by this message that I'm giving, that's enough. It doesn't matter what the church people think, what the staff team think. Like, it doesn't matter what they think. But if I've done what's right by you, and if I've pleased you, that's all that matters. And I think I do have to remind myself of that, because it's easy to sometimes fall back into caring too much about what people think. Yeah,
I don't know about you, but I feel people pleasing is in my bones. It's been in my bones since I was very young, and it continues to be something that will challenge me from time to time. Yeah, I think especially when it comes to work, or it comes to meeting new people, is that you want to be liked. Now, I don't think it's inherently bad to want to be nice and to want to be, liked by others, but it's when you place that as an idol. It's that I've noticed that there's times where someone may not like me. I've shared Jesus with people and they've gone, no, sorry, like, what's wrong with you? Kind of thing. And it's those moments where you go, oh, but I want you to like me. And those are the points where I go, then maybe there is a bit more work to go on in that heart there. But when you've been doing something and relying on it for so long, like my childhood, coming out was mostly just, I need people to like me so I can survive. So now I'm in this place where I'm like, well, my identity is completely different. My identity is now in Christ. I don't need people to like me. I said, but I allow the love of Christ to flow through me. And that's a totally different way of thinking than going, well, I need to try to find something in them to make them like me, and I need to remember this. And no, it's totally different. It's almost like God goes, relax. I feel like he says that to me a lot. He just goes, dude, relax.
Yeah, it's so good.
You try so hard. Is that something that resonates with you as well?
Massively. Yeah. And I remember hearing a sermon about idols, and you think about the classic idols of money or power or sex. And then he said, oh, but what about the idol of reputation? Like, how often do we idolize our own reputation and what people think of us? And I was like, oh, guilty. That's something which is sneaky. It doesn't seem that obvious. It's something to watch out for, definitely. And something like I say, Jesus is continuously refining us, and we're never going to be perfect until we go to heaven one day. So it's good to be humbled. It's good to be humbled and realize, okay, I'm not the finished article, and there's still lots more God needs to do in me.
It's clear right now, especially here at home in England, that there's a lot of young people who are becoming very curious, especially with the world events happening at the moment, becoming very curious, not only in just the fact that, is there a God? Is there, because there's such clear evil going on, I think there's people who are recognizing that there must be a balance to this. I think for me, the release of like the Epstein files, for example, was such a clear indicator of me of such evil and such like demonic activity that was going on, that it almost confirmed to me that if there is this going on, there must be an adverse of this. There must be a balance. With light comes darkness, with good comes evil. And I was like, well, I think a lot of people are waking up to that and going, well, there must be something. There's that yearning inside of their heart. There's that pull. So to those people who are feeling that tug at the moment, what would you say to them?
I'd say that they're feeling that for a reason, because they're like I said at the beginning, people are all longing for truth. People are all longing for something to hold on to. And I think I just encourage them to seek and to explore faith in Jesus, and to really give it a good shot, to do Alpha, which is a course you can explore Christianity, to chat to Christian people in their lives, or to even just visit a church.
Yeah.
And obviously there's loads of different kinds of churches. To find a church that suits you, whether it's more contemporary and modern, or whether you liked more traditional stuff. But I would just say, Jesus says he is the truth. Jesus says he's the way, the truth, and the life. And ultimately, like, I've seen it in so many other people's lives, fullness of life is found in Jesus, and I've experienced that myself. So I would just encourage anybody who's curious just to take that step and to pursue finding out more about Jesus.
Amen. Emma, thank you so much. I have taken so much from this conversation. I'm so glad we could do this.
Yes.
And good luck with the baby.
Oh, thank you.
Next time we'll have you and Andy on at another time, and I think we'll really speak into that relationship part of things. But for now, thank you so much, and thank you for watching, everyone here.
Amazing.
Amen.
Thank you.